Well, thank you all for being here. Wonderful filmmakers and films. And I'm Timothy Winterstein. I'm a shorts programmer with the festival. And also, if anyone's watching this in the future, thank you all for supporting independent films, especially independent short films. I think not too many opportunities to see independent short films. And so thank you for watching and supporting, and also the Spokane International Film Festival for supporting the work of the festival, so we can keep doing this in the future. I think we'll just start by having each one of you introduce yourself and your film, and what part you played in the making of your film. So let's see. Let me, in the order that I have, how about I'll just do it in the order I have. Ron, if you want to go first and introduce yourself and your film.
Sure. Now, first off, let me apologize for my look. I had some dental bridge work in my front of my mouth. I'm waiting for that to get fixed. But anyway, my film is called The Raven. I wrote it and produced it and animated it. So from a poem that I wrote in 1984 for my college literary magazine. And I've always wanted to make an animated film out of it. I thought it was like a perfect fodder for like a Rankin and Bass Halloween special. It took me a lot of years to get my friend to make the models for it. And he passed away right before we were ready to start. So I had to hire another guy to do the bird puppet. But it's a film I'm really proud of.
Good, thank you. Next on my screen is Lynn Thomas.
Hi, I'm Lynn Thomas, and the film that I was part of was What the Wood Wants, which is, if you've had a chance to look at it, is a film about kind of Pacific Rim tone woods and the work that they do. So most of the filming was done by my friend and colleague, Danny Hoffman. And it's part of a larger project that the two of us and then Mike Sanderson are doing about figured maple in the Pacific Northwest, and specifically the poaching of figured maple. So visiting that site where they do not use poached wood, but it was kind of a way for us to begin to learn about kind of the commodity chain around figured maple. So yeah, so we have other films that we're working on, but that one was kind of just a beginning.
Thank you. Next on my screen is Isabella.
Hi, I'm Isabella. I'm the kind of co-director for the Junt Unvaulted piece. Luke, who was my co-director, couldn't be here today, but it very much was a collaboration, shooting, editing, and directing with the both of us for a little feature piece on the Junt Art Museum, which is here in Spokane.
Next, I have Trish on my screen.
Hi, I'm Trish Harnato, and I am the director and co-writer and co-executive producer of the short film You Wouldn't Understand. And I'm here with my co-writer, Jacob. I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, co-writer, co-producer on You Wouldn't Understand with Trish, and 1/3 of our production company called Steel Drum and Space that produced it.
And also actor in the play.
Oh yeah, that too.
In the play, in the film, sorry, in the short film.
This is going real well.
Yeah. Back to you.
Good. And let's see, Michael.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so I'm Michael. I'm the director, writer of Gus. Yeah.
Good, thanks. Did I miss any filmmakers? Okay, I think that's. Let's see. On Friday night, we had Best of the Northwest, another shorts block of Northwest filmmakers, not all based in the Northwest. But I'm interested in a question that I asked them, and it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, the located in the Pacific Northwest, but what role did place play in sort of how you went about making your film or the inspiration for it? And that doesn't necessarily have to be the Northwest, but you have some connection to the Northwest, some connection to, and many of your films take place in the Northwest. Anybody have any thoughts on the part that place plays in your films? Maybe you can wave or unmute yourself there.
My film is set in Boston or Baltimore, even though it never says that in the film. That's where Poe lived. And it was all made in the Northwest and it was written here. But as far as connection with the story, I can't think of any. Every player involved in it is from this area.
Let me ask you a follow-up while I have you here spotlighted. What in terms of the period of time that passed between when you said you wrote the poem and making of the film, was it just a matter of getting the models built, or was there some other things that went along with sort of in the process of getting that made?
Yeah, well, when I first started, I wasn't even a filmmaker when I wrote the poem, and I was always in my head that I wanted to do that. It's been read on stage a couple of times in different forms, but it was about 6 years ago that I talked to my friend Mitch, who was this great artist, about making the puppets and backgrounds for it. And so he was just doing it in his spare time and around all his other projects. And it took him 6 years to get that one puppet finished. And so I got that and a lot of these background things he used for his action figures, which I also used in some other animated films. So I used those for backgrounds instead. And then I had to hire Patrick Treadway to make the Raven puppet. Yeah, that's the reason it took so long. Is just I didn't have the money to make these professional puppets, but Mitch was willing to do it in his spare time. So I was on his schedule.
Well, any of the I'll let if there's anybody in an audience member who would like to ask a question, feel free to do so.
Jump in about the place question.
Yeah, sure.
Also, I wanted to say I love the Raven and I loved the animation and the puppets. I thought it was terrific. So I would say Danny, Mike, and we originally had planned to do something about trees and forests in actually East Africa, where we've done work before, and in the Pacific Northwest. But the pandemic basically shut down any things that we could do in Africa. And so I would say in terms of our project, place became much more important. And Pacific Rim Tonewoods, we had actually never been out there before we went and filmed that day. And it was just a spectacular Pacific Northwest summer day. And it was just kind of magical to be there and in a place where there were all these connections to kind of the woods and trees and things.
Good, thank you.
I'll jump in about place really quick. First of all, I want to say that again, Patrick Treadway is amazing, Ron, and I've known him since I was very little. I grew up in Spokane, though I don't live there anymore. But Jacob and I, when we were putting together or like location scouting for You Wouldn't Understand, a place was absolutely crucial. And we ended up filming it kind of on the New York, New Jersey border, kind of upstate, but it completely, kind of made our film and also changed our film once we found that location a lot, which ended up being crucial to the final product.
Would one of you want to say something about how it changed the location changed what you did or the film itself?
Yeah, were you?
Yeah, well, I think, because a key part of the film is having like the breadth of space. We needed a really big field for a long shot that we were really kind of obsessed with. And the various locations that we chose or we're looking at, we would have to do a lot of stitching to create that space. And then we just ended up finding this space that just happened to be like 3 football fields long. So it was just perfect. And there was a moment in our script where we needed a little bit of masking. So when we got to the location, off yonder in the distance, there just so happened to be this like tuft of trees and bushes that really helped us, that we didn't really expect there to be. So it was kind of a wonderful thing to happen.
Yeah, agree.
Obviously, the Isabella, the art museum, there's a very, I mean, it's located in Spokane, so there's a very clear sense of a particular place, and yet the movie has to do, you know, kind of with art in general. Do you want to talk a little bit about the connections between a local art museum and sort of art that's known around the world?
Yeah. When you asked that question, I was kind of thinking about that. The Gent Art Museum is located in Spokane, and the film itself just takes place within the museum. And some of it is, some of what Paul, who's the museum director, talks about is specific to Spokane, but I think a lot of what he talked about is applicable to any number of places. Just kind of the lessons that he's taken away from art and how art fits into culture, I think it's applicable not just to Spokane, but to pretty much anywhere where art is present.
Michael, yours takes place mostly in a house, but do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, mine does take mostly in a house, but I did film it in downtown Spokane in one of the older apartments in downtown. And I think that's what really fascinating, what really drew me into making something like this. One, alongside with it being the pandemic, and there was a lot of films out there being made that were a little bit darker tone. And I really wanted to stray away from that. I wanted to kind of make almost like a dark comedy, kind of lighthearted feeling film. And I heard a lot about it, like older buildings in downtown, some of them kind of being haunted. So I wanted to kind of play off a little bit of those tropes to construct the film. And even though it's all taking place in a house, it was definitely inspired by just all the stories in those older buildings in Spokane.
Thank you. Any of the other audience members, do you have anything that any questions? Wave your hand or wave your that little hand raiser.
I have a question for
Sure.
oh shoot, for Mike, I think, who did Gus. This isn't about place, but I thought the style of your piece was really distinct, and I'm wondering if there are any like filmmakers that kind of inspired that style for you.
Absolutely, yeah. It was very heavily inspired by a culmination of Wes Anderson a little bit with the quirkiness and the way we shot certain things, and just overall it kind of gives off like a little bit of a holiday film, like National Lampoon's, kind of playing off of those kind of vibes. I wanted to make a really lighthearted film, and yeah, very much so inspired by the symmetry of things like Wes Anderson has created. But yeah, we shot it in 4:3 ratio, a 4:3 ratio, because we wanted to make it seem like he was enclosed and trapped within the apartment and like confined within those two, but then also have the feeling of, just kind of that feeling that the owners or the people living in the apartment were also kind of stuck with him too.
I
Where
definitely saw the Wes Anderson come out of that.
Thank you for the question.
Where are these haunted buildings in Spokane? I'm obsessed. I want to know more. Like,
yeah, it was just kind of like a rabbit hole of certain things that I've heard in like certain buildings in downtown Spokane. Some were most of them are kind of like false stories, but they just kind of went down a rabbit hole of like I lived in an old building in Spokane, and I would always think I'd hear something like when I'm the only one home, but they just kind of like went on like a Google search and just like hopped on a bunch of stories where, the landlord would trap certain tenants inside a basement. And I'm like, oh my God, this is going crazy. Like I wasn't expecting stories like that, especially in Spokane, because I feel like I would have heard about them before. But yeah, I think it had a lot to do with me living in downtown and in an older building that kind of like strike my interest.
Any other questions from people out there? Lynn?
Yeah, I had a question for Trish and Jacob, just if they could talk more about kind of the inspiration behind their film and kind of the history of making it, because it seems like you had been working on it for a while in terms of finding locations and things.
Yeah, so Jacob and Anthony Arkin, who's like our third kind of cohort in our company, Steel Drum and Space, we've been making films together for like a decade. We actually had, like literally a decade ago, the very first film we ever made was in the Spokane International Film Festival, called You Should Be a Better Friend. So it's very nice to be back, and we're glad you guys are back. But you know what, I think all of us, and Jacob, please chime in, like we all think that with You Wouldn't Understand, it kind of like we've reached the pinnacle of everything we learned of making so many kind of, different sort of, dark comedies, absurdist comedies over the years. And it basically was just this like perfect amalgamation of all of our skills. It brought out the humor that we all like. And when we went and made it finally, we had been in pre-production. What, Jacob, what do you think? Like a couple months, probably?
I'd say about
Yeah, but there's something about like, we have such a shorthand that once we got on site and like kind of what we were talking about, made adjustments as we all do when you get into the actuality of creating something, I think that we were just, running at like, full capacity and like getting all of our creative ideas into this project. So it was really fun. And we're all obsessed with tone and tonal shifts, like internally throughout the piece. And so we were able to kind of like, explore that, but then also in post really, really add these dimensions. Like, we worked with an amazing composer on the score for that long shot that Jacob was talking about, like when he's running across the field. What else, Jacob? I'm trying to think of like fun stuff that went into.
it's so fun stuff. When we're in it, it was just terrifying.
I know, it was terrifying. Don't worry. It's always terrifying, but especially because it's like time crunch, right? Like, I don't know about you guys, but we had 3 days to shoot this. And since we were doing it during the day, we had to like really hone in on these daylight hours, and continuity was such a big deal. And, our crew was pretty small, I'm not sure how everyone funds their short films, but, we try to keep it, everyone wears lots of hats in our productions. But you know what, it ended up working out great. We ended up doing a dummy drop, like during it, like we had a whole, when he falls from the sky, I don't know if you guys have seen it, like spoiler alert, we were trying to solve that problem for a long time before, and we ended up, Jake, was it Tony's idea? Who said, yeah,
It was
like,
Tony's,
yeah. He's like, let's just do an old dummy drop, like pulling from like, he's like a cinema master. And so kind of pulling from, his lifetime of experience of how you can actually make stuff happen. So it was really great. And I feel like, the vibe of like our previous work kind of went into You Wouldn't Understand, and is very reflective of how we feel about ideal filmmaking.
Pete, do you have a question?
I do. Someone said funding. So that's the question that I want to know. Not too specific, obviously, not like the names of the people that maybe you ask for funding, but maybe just the emails of the people. What's the source of funding that you use, and are there places that people could look for funding that they might not have thought of, or are there places that people think funding is going to be a positive experience, but you would say don't even bother? That's but those are the kind of the three main questions that I would have in relationship to that.
Would have any thoughts?
I'll have a thought. I have no idea, Pete, like who couldn't solve this problem for us? Like, I think that like, I mean, for us, the biggest hurdle for funding has been not to wait for funding and just to figure out a way to move forward. And regardless of if it takes a little bit longer or if, you know, we need to like widen our search so people do have multiple skill sets. Like, I think that that's just something that Jacob and I always go back to is not feeling like we need to, or we should not pursue something because of lack of funding. And there's always like, and there's always people that want to, you know, work on a great project, and it's just kind of building the right team for us or for me.
Yeah, and kind of on that point too, you know, sometimes like the lack of funding is, we kind of embrace that sometimes. Like, for example, the dummy drop that Trish was like kind of mentioning, specifically that point, we were trying to wrap our heads around like how to solve that problem and looking at our bottom line and our budget. And we're like, we don't have the money, because we're talking about like shipping in like scaffolding and going to like Home Depot, but like it just like all this stuff that we don't have. And then the solve was just throw it up in the air and let it fall. So it was, I don't know, pushed up against a corner. It's amazing what you can kind of do, and calling in favors is always a huge part of it too, which is nice of people. So
Necessity and invention and all that.
yeah.
Anyone else have thoughts on that question?
Yeah. Well, my stuff, when I was making films in LA, I was paid getting budgets from various distributors who hired me to make different films. But since then, it's been all out of pocket. I just do micro budget stuff and write in things that I know I have and locations I have. I had a great collaboration with Mitch Tyner for all those years because he was such a great artist and musician and actor. Now that tragically ended last year, but I've crowdsourced a couple of films too, but most of them are out of pocket.
Ron, can I ask you, how long did it take you to kind of put together? I have no idea about, you know, animation and how long it takes things, but it seems like a lot of work that goes into that. Can you say something about how long it took you to kind of put together your film?
Well, it took about 6 months altogether. And only about 2 of that was the shooting. I had to wait for my score quite a while, and Patrick Treadway was out of town doing his Mark Twain show back east. And so I had to wait for him to finish The Bird and also to do the narration for the film. But well, basically, that's it. I mean, I just used the spare bedroom in our house and made it my animation studio for a few months and worked all night every night.
The questions from either from filmmakers or audience? All right, well, yeah, Jacob.
Unmute, sorry about that. Still learning Zoom.
Man.
This question for Lynn, if you could speak a little bit about, like, you said this was a part of a larger project, What the Wood Wants to Be. Yeah, what is like kind of like that larger project that you were talking about? But also, I'm just so curious in general, how long does like this process take from, you know, from like sourcing these trees to like actually developing into it like a guitar? It's just so fascinating to me. And like watching this watching the documentary, just the way they cut, like they have the stump and immediately they can tell, like lay out everything. It was actually so fascinating to watch, to realize like that's where the guitar starts being built, right there, that quickly. It was fascinating.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, so the big stump that you see that they're cutting, that's that was like a 300-year-old Sitka spruce that was actually from Alaska. So actually, I think they had like bid on and bought that tree maybe 2 years before they actually started cutting it up that day. But you know, once they've cut it up, I mean, different trees are processed differently. So you could see the figured maple, which is the tree we're really interested in, that was cut into those really thin sheets that almost look like paper, because that figuring is so valuable. It's mainly put as a veneer on top of guitars. But I think they ship their stuff out pretty fast. And, you know, in the pandemic, as with so many things, there was a huge boom in demand for high-end guitars, people like stuck in their houses wanting beautiful instruments to play. So yeah, I think they were getting that wood out as fast as they could. Yeah. What really interested us, so Danny and I were faculty at UW. So I'm a historian and Danny's an anthropologist. And so originally we were interested in a project about forests in the Pacific Northwest and in Africa, where we do our research. And there was an article like 2 years ago now in the Seattle paper about something called the Maple Fire that had happened over in the Olympic Peninsula, where some guys had gone into the Olympic National Forest to poach figured big leaf maples in the national forest, and had set a bee's nest on fire because it was at the base of the tree. And then the fire basically got out of control. It went up into the canopy and it ended up burning like 3,000 acres of the Olympic National Forest. So that was the story that originally interested us. I knew nothing about figured big leaf maple before that. But then as we were waiting for that trial to happen, because of COVID, there were all these delays. There weren't trials happening basically for a long time. We then just tried to learn everything we could about figured big leaf maple. And so then that's how we got in touch with mill owners. And it was a good project to do in the pandemic because it was mainly outdoors and all. But then finally the trial happened in July. And so now the film we've really been working on, it's called The Maple Cutter. And it's really about the central protagonist in the court case. So he eventually was convicted of timber theft, but not of the fire. So it's kind of an interesting story. So, yeah.
May I ask a follow-up? You said, you know, professors of history and anthropology. Have you made other films, or how did you get involved with filmmaking as an aspect of that?
Yeah, so Danny is a visual anthropologist, and he started out as a photojournalist. So he's an incredibly skilled photographer and, you know, I think filmmaker. So Danny's made other documentaries. They mainly relate to his research in West Africa. So I'm trying to think, I guess he's made a couple things in the US, but I would say this is kind of his biggest project that's related to the Pacific Northwest. I'm a historian who's done a lot analyzing visual images, but I had never worked as an artist, you know, making something. So yeah, but Danny and then my partner, Mike, are really kind of the camera people, the film crew. I'm more kind of the researcher. Yeah, kind of more doing the historical or yeah, that part of things. But yeah, but Danny's quite experienced.
Thanks. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, I guess this question goes out to everyone, and I'm super curious about it. But what were some of the, I wouldn't say issues, but some of the things that arose during this whole pandemic in creating your project?
Nobody had any issues with the pandemic.
Well, for me, it freed up my time. I finally had the time to work on this thing. You know, like I said, it was now or never since my my puppet maker was gone. So it was actually very helpful for me. I didn't have other places to go.
We actually shot ours before the pandemic. Even though it's so funny, it looks like we shot it during the pandemic because it, you know, checks all the boxes of outside and stuff. So we were just kind of, you know, in the last of post. So what it affected for us is that, you know, we've never seen it with a live audience, and that's hard with a comedy, you know, and so, you know, though we've been in festivals like yourself, like this one, like we've never, ever sat in a room and seen it how it was intended to see. And so that's something that we still haven't had, which is crazy.
Do you have one upcoming that is a live one?
Jacob, do you want to take this one?
No, I mean, well, actually, we so to Michael's question about shooting during the pandemic, or like what challenges arose and whatnot, we did shoot another short during the pandemic that I will speak to that. Like, I guess like we've always worked kind of like on skeleton crews, like just generally how we work. But this was even more so. Like, I probably count on one hand how many people. I know specifically we had like 4 or 5 people, that's it, including the actors, to film the short because of the COVID protocols, and just everything that went in, the testing, because we shot that in December 2020. So yeah, constantly testing and isolating and all of that, and just like with very, 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 very few people, which was, it was exhilarating and fun to like do something creative during that time, but I never want to shoot like that again. It was too tough. It broke everyone's spirit.
Yeah, I can chime in about the COVID thing. We didn't really run into any issues, but what was interesting and sort of bittersweet was that the museum, because of COVID, was like practically abandoned, like not abandoned, but they had very few visitors during COVID. So it was a really big bummer for them because they weren't getting visitors. But for us as filmmakers, it was good for us because seeing as the entire thing was shot in the museum, we were able to do that in the middle of a day that they were open because there was nobody in there. So it was good for us, but not so good for them.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's crazy how like it worked out that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think they're doing better now, though. I think they have more people coming in.
Maybe your film can contribute to that.
Maybe, hopefully.
Isabella, do you have a favorite piece at the museum? For someone who's never been there, you're like, you have to go see this piece.
They have a really great collection of Chihuly glasswork. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. I think he's Seattle based. I'm not sure. I don't think he's still alive, but he's really popular and has like beautiful glass artwork. And the museum has this like huge red chandelier in it that's like glowing and huge, and it's awesome to go see. And then they have like a whole case of a bunch of his different glass work, and they just have a really great collection. It's definitely worth checking out.
Really quick, I remember in the movie they had said something about, or you said something about like, what is the weight on that chandelier thing? It's like 2,000 pounds or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's like a couple tons. It's crazy.
Yeah,
we were I can't remember if we actually included this in the film, but we asked about what happens if there's like an earthquake that happens. Would the whole chandelier fall and shatter? And I think he said hypothetically it wouldn't, because they made it so that if there's an earthquake, it would just sway a little bit and it wouldn't fully fall. But yeah, that would be a nightmare to have that happen.
I think Lynn, did you did you have any comments or thoughts on, I don't know when exactly your film was shot, but were there difficulties related to pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, basically because it was outside, you can see that day all the workers at Pacific Rim Tone Woods had masks on. Steve McMinn, who's the owner, there were times he's talking where maybe he doesn't have one on, but yeah, but it was, yeah, again, it was a project that worked well with being outdoors.
Other questions? You have a question?
Michael, did your Gus have a mask under the sheet?
Yes, he did. Yeah. And the thing is the way we kind of cheated everything with everyone being so close to one another. None of them were related, none of the actors. So we had to shoot it in a way where the opposite person had a mask and the other person didn't. So even though they're both in the same room without a mask, we actually shot it twice. So we had double the amount of footage, and then we would cut it in post and make it look like they're sitting next to one another without a mask, even though we shot it twice.
It's interesting.
But yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, just getting the use of movie magic and cutting it up, splicing it, you know, just trying to mask everything and
So to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, trying to mask it. No pun intended.
I'm interested in maybe there's something that you haven't been, filmmakers you haven't been asked about, or something your best anecdote from the time of filming. Talked about some difficulties, but maybe there's something happy coincidence or a challenge or something like that the best story from set, something like along those lines. Anybody? I don't know if anybody has something where it really sticks out. Everything went very smoothly and
Well, I do. So that where we ended up shooting was also like, if you would turn the camera around, there was a house. So it was basically an Airbnb, and we all went and stayed there. And again, it's in the middle of this like wilderness preserve as well. And so we weren't like, you know, it was about 2.5 hours from the city, but we didn't really know the area. And apparently there's it's like, you know, like hay fields, and there's also like a big hunting community there. So as I said, like, you know, there's only so many hours in the day, and so we're on kind of a tight schedule. But so the morning we went out to set up for the shoot, there was like a Jeep on this side right where we shot, and there was a hunter that was like out hunting that morning. And he came back. Like, right, we just continued to set up, you know, knowing that hopefully he would come back, and he did, and he moved. So it was kind of like dealing with that sort of thing. And then there was like, you know, tractors that would roll into frame, and we would bribe them with plates of cookies to kind of go somewhere else. And like, so we kind of had to like navigate the environment as we went by, you know, pouring on the kindness, I think. So
orange on all the cast and crew.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. We had no idea where we were, but it worked out.
Good.
My only thing was, since I had to wait for the bird model, I had to shoot everything that didn't have the raven in it first. I had no idea what that bird was going to finally look like. Came out as a little larger than I'd hoped, but it worked fine. I think there's a little bit of difference in style between the two puppets there, because they were made by different people, and I hope nobody finds that clashing. But I used what I could.
Yeah.
About seeing your film in an audience too is something I'm really looking forward to with this one as well. It's going to be at the comedy festival here at the end of February, and then we're showing it in Seattle at the Northwest Con. So I got a few lined up. Can't wait to see it with people.
Yeah, that's the best way.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts about things from set, or any other questions?
I have a question for Trish and Jacob. You mentioned that you guys kind of wore several different hats on set. I'm wondering if you can get a little more specific about kind of what your team was like, or the crew that you had to put on this production.
Sure. So Jacob and I wrote the script together, and, you know, served as executive producers for the whole thing. Anthony Arkin, who's the other actor in the film, and also edited the film. And so the three of us really worked very closely in post together. we had an AD, a sound, a great sound person. Jacob, I'm trying to think of the crew. I guess I really mean Jacob and Tony and I wore 10 hats each, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we're like putting out craft service, like
Yeah.
tailoring my suit. Like I'm like sewing it and like literally anything and everything, like props and whatnot. But I will say,
we were for the production designers, like, all of
this
that.
is both a funny story and kind of like a small world type of story. So we shot in a very, very rural area in the middle of nowhere. It's a village essentially, and it's only, I think, 2,000 people, 2,000 or 3,000 people, give or take. And when we were getting our movie colored, we were at Colorworks, and we're in the room with the colorist, and he was saying, he's like, wow, this place looks really, really familiar. Where is this? And we told him, he's like, oh, that's my hometown. And the chances of that happening are slim to none. And that was really, really funny and bizarre and wonderful.
We've got a few minutes here. If anybody has any. Wait a second. Well, I'll give some people a little bit of a chance to think of a question if they have one. While we're doing that, why don't we just go down the line and maybe say where people can find out more information about you, your films, or maybe what you're working on next, websites, things like that. Anybody, and then it'll be recorded for posterity. Well, you probably don't know which. On my screen, Isabella's first. So
you know what? I don't have my own website or anything. I'm a Gonzaga student, so I'm like still getting into the whole filmmaking thing. So I have my name, Isabella Harris Hamlin, but I don't have like a portfolio of work online or anything, but something I would like to do.
And the museum has a website, I assume, too?
Yeah, they do. Okay. I think it's johnartmuseum.org or something like that. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure people can find it there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Trish?
Yeah, I have a website. It's my name, Trish Harnato. And there's lots of kind of work on there, I think. Jacob, and as Jacob said, like we have a new short, hopefully, that will be places soon. And I'm a playwright, and I have a play opening in Seattle in April with the Washington Ensemble Theater. And so that will be running for a few weeks. Go Zags and go Huskies. You know, I get torn between the two. But yeah.
Good. Jacob, do you have more?
No, Trish just said it all. But my website's jacobaware.com.
Okay, great. Ron?
Sure. Well, I don't have a website either, but Facebook, you can always find me there. In the late 80s the late 90s and early 2000s, I worked in LA cranking out low budget horror films. And a lot of those are making resurgences right now. Two of my best ones were just re-released by sovhorror.com. And Vinegar Syndrome picked up The Fear, which is the first film I wrote in '95. I'm starting to get a lot of attention all of a sudden, which is nice. Which it came with money.
Website's next.
Yeah, I guess.
Good. Interesting. Thank you. Lynn?
Yeah, I just put in the chat. So there's another little short that we've made about Big Leaf Maple. which isn't the maple cutter, but I just put it in the chat. So the Simpson Center for the Humanities, which is the Humanities Center at UW, has sponsored our projects. And so you can see that short just on their website. It's just like a 5-minute short, but it explains more about big leaf maple.
And the one that you mentioned, the larger project about the burning and stealing of the poaching of those trees, is that coming soon?
Yeah, it's so we have a rough cut now, and we're hoping by the end of the month it will go through sound and color. So then
Okay.
we hope to submit it to festivals after that. But
Okay.
that's 45 minutes, so it's longer than these.
Yeah, great, thanks. And Michael.
Website mikecerna.com. I've created a few short films before. Kind of have a few scripts lined up to work on, but just trying to figure things out pandemic wise, kind of like what Jacob was saying, like things aren't working out the way they wanted to, and the pandemic kind of throws like a wrench in there. So yeah,
Certainly. We have like 1 minute if somebody's got a burning question that you thought of in the last 30 seconds here. I don't see any hands. Jacob, did you have one?
I do. I do.
Go for it.
It's mostly for the documentaries. I'm really like, I am obsessed with all things documentary. But being in the film festival circuit, I have grown to really, really love short form documentaries. And to the documentarians, I'm really interested to hearing like if you too like, do you like that short form space as opposed to like the feature length documentaries?
I'm so new to it all. I would say, we're worried that the 45-minute maple cutter might be too long. Like we feel like we have a better shot of getting into film festivals with something shorter. The central figure in the maple cutter is a fascinating person. So, we're hoping he does carry 40 minutes, but we're a little bit worried about it.
Okay, I'm gonna ask real quick on that one. So did you ever consider like, okay, we have more, we can make it into a kind of a little bit longer feature, or should we make it shorter? What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess that Danny's worried that 45 minutes is in between. And we just can't figure out, and maybe you all who have much more experience with film festivals, like, is it better to have like a short, longer piece or a long, shorter piece in terms of getting into a program? So, yeah, I don't know what the answer to that is. And maybe it depends on the festival.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, I guess to answer your question, Jacob, for me, I've only ever done shorter form documentary things. I think the longest documentary piece I did was like 26 minutes, which is still pretty short. I feel like it really depends on the subject matter. I don't know if anyone could sit through like a 2-hour thing about just the Junt Art Museum. But I mean, maybe the Junt Art Museum has some secrets that would be really interesting to find out about. But yeah, I think, some subject matter for documentary style work requires like more than just 5 or 10 minutes, but I do really like doing shorter form content with that kind of stuff. Just it's a short little snippet of information that hopefully leaves people wanting more.
Well, thank you so much to all the filmmakers. Thank you for your films and for the opportunity to screen them at SpIFF. And thank you to everyone who watched films. And we still have a few days left of the virtual festival. So please buy tickets to films, support the filmmakers, support the festival. It's all run, thanks to people who watch films. So thank you. And thank you to all of you for being here for this question and answer. Really appreciated it. And thank you for your thoughtful answers. And and check out some more films at the Spokane International Film Festival. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks a
so
lot.
much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you guys.